Jake Morrison had been tracking the stolen cattle for 3 days straight across the harsh Arizona territory. The sun beat down mercilessly on his weathered face as he guided his horse, Thunder, through the rocky terrain. Sweat soaked through his dusty shirt, and his water supply was running dangerously low. The cattle thieves had been smart, leading the stolen herd through the most difficult landscape they could find. Jake had lost their trail twice, but his years of experience as a ranch foreman had taught him to read the land like a book. Broken twigs, disturbed rocks, and the occasional hoofprint told him he was still on the right path. As Thunder carefully picked his way down a steep ravine, Jake noticed something unusual. The rock formation ahead seemed different from the surrounding cliffs. There appeared to be an opening, partially hidden behind a curtain of desert vegetation. Jake had ridden this territory many times before, but he had never noticed this particular spot. Thunder snorted nervously as they approached the hidden entrance. The horse's ears swiveled forward, alert to something Jake couldn't yet detect. Jake dismounted and examined the ground carefully. Fresh tracks led toward the concealed opening, but these weren't cattle tracks. These were human footprints, small and light, made by someone wearing soft-soled moccasins. Jake drew his rifle from its scabbard and checked that it was loaded. He had learned to be cautious in Apache territory. The wars between settlers and the Apache had been brutal, and trust was hard to come by on both sides. Still, Jake had always tried to treat the native peoples with respect when their paths crossed. The opening in the rock face was larger than it had initially appeared. As Jake pushed aside the carefully arranged branches and desert grass that concealed it, he realized someone had gone to great lengths to hide this entrance. The camouflage was expertly done, using natural materials in a way that would fool most people riding by. Jake led Thunder a short distance from the opening and tied him to a sturdy mesquite bush. He grabbed his canteen and rifle, then approached the hidden entrance on foot. The opening was just tall enough for a person to walk through without ducking, and it led into what appeared to be a natural cave system. The temperature dropped noticeably as Jake stepped into the shadowy interior. After the blazing heat outside, the coolness was a welcome relief. His eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light filtering in from the entrance. The cave extended much deeper than he had expected. With smooth walls that suggested water had carved this space over countless years. As Jake moved deeper into the cave, he began to notice signs that someone lived here. The floor had been swept clean, and smooth stones had been arranged to create walking paths. Niches in the walls held various items. Though Jake couldn't make out the details in the poor light, then he heard it, a soft sound that made him freeze in place. Someone was humming a low, melodic tune that echoed off the cave walls. The sound was coming from deeper in the cave system, around a bend where a faint glow suggested there might be another source of light. Jake hesitated. He was trespassing, that much was clear. This was someone's home, their private sanctuary. But his curiosity and the desperate need to find water drove him forward. He moved as quietly as possible, his boots making only the softest whispers against the stone floor. As he rounded the bend, Jake stopped dead in his tracks. The cave opened into a large circular chamber, naturally lit by an opening high above that allowed sunlight to filter down in golden shafts. A small underground spring bubbled up from the floor, creating a crystal-clear pool before disappearing into a crack in the far wall. But it wasn't the natural beauty of the chamber that caught Jake's attention. It was the woman kneeling beside the spring, her back to him as she worked. She wore traditional Apache clothing, a long dress made of soft deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork. Her long black hair hung in a single braid down her back, adorned with small silver ornaments that caught the light. The woman was grinding corn on a stone metate, the rhythmic sound punctuating her quiet humming. Around the chamber, Jake could see the evidence of a carefully maintained home. Woven baskets held supplies, beautifully crafted pottery sat on stone shelves, and sleeping furs were neatly arranged in one corner. Desert plants grew in pottery containers, their green leaves a striking contrast to the stone walls. Jake realized he was holding his breath. He began to back away slowly, not wanting to disturb the woman's peaceful solitude. But as he took his first step backward, his boots scraped against a loose stone. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. The woman spun around with lightning speed, a knife appearing in her hand as if by magic. Her dark eyes locked onto Jake's, and for a moment neither of them moved. Jake could see that she was younger than he had initially thought, perhaps in her late 20s, with strong features and intelligent eyes that showed no fear, only wariness. "I'm sorry," Jake said quietly, raising his hands to show they were empty. He had set his rifle down when he stopped to look at the chamber. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was tracking stolen cattle and got turned around." The woman said nothing, but Jake could see her evaluating him, taking in his dusty clothes, his weathered face, and his respectful posture. Her grip on the knife remained firm, but she didn't advance or retreat. "My name is Jake Morrison," he continued, keeping his voice low and calm. "I work for the Triple Star Ranch about 20 miles east of here. Some thieves made off with our cattle 3 days ago, and I've been following their trail." Still, the woman remained silent, watching him with those sharp, intelligent eyes. Jake began to think she might not speak English, though something in her expression suggested she understood every word he was saying. "I can see this is your home," Jake went on. "It's beautiful. I'll leave now and make sure I never mention this place to anyone. You have my word on that." As Jake began to turn away, the woman finally spoke. Her voice was clear and strong, with only a slight accent coloring her English. "The men you seek passed this way 2 days ago. They drove the cattle north, toward the old mining camp at Silver Creek." Jake turned back, surprised not only that she had spoken but that she was helping him. "You saw them?" "I see everything that passes through this valley," she replied. 30 head of cattle, marked with a 3-pointed star. 3 men driving them, 2 Mexican, 1 Anglo. The Anglo had a scar across his left cheek. That description matched exactly what Jake knew about the thieves. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "That information will save me days of tracking." The woman studied him for another long moment before lowering her knife. "You are not like the other cowboys who come through this land. They take what they want and ask no permission." "I try to show respect where it's earned," Jake replied. "And it's clear you've earned it. This place is like nothing I've ever seen." For the first time, the woman's expression softened slightly. "It has been my sanctuary for 2 years now. Few know of its existence." Jake sensed there was a story behind her words, but he didn't press. "Your secret is safe with me. I give you my word as a gentleman." Something in his tone must have convinced her of his sincerity, because she nodded slowly. "I am called Ayana. In your language it means eternal blossom." "It's a beautiful name," Jake said honestly. "And fitting, given how you've made this place bloom in the middle of the desert." Ayana gestured toward the spring. "Your canteen is empty, and your horse will need water as well. You may drink here before you continue your pursuit." Jake's throat was parched, and he gratefully accepted the offer. As he knelt beside the spring and filled his canteen with the cool, sweet water, he marveled at its purity. The water had a clean taste unlike anything he'd experienced in the desert. "This spring never runs dry," Ayana explained, settling back onto her knees beside her corn-grinding stone. "Even in the worst drought years, it flows strong and pure." "How did you find this place?" Jake asked, then immediately regretted the question. It was too personal, too intrusive for someone he'd just met, but Ayana didn't seem offended. She was quiet for a moment, her hands still as she considered her answer. "I was running from grief and pain. The desert led me here when I needed shelter most." Jake heard the sadness in her voice and understood that she had lost someone important to her. In the Apache way, he knew, widows often lived apart from their people for a time to mourn properly. The careful way she maintained this hidden refuge suggested she planned to stay for a while. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said simply. Ayana's hands resumed their rhythmic grinding of corn. "Death is part of life. But healing takes time, and sometimes healing requires solitude." Jake finished filling his canteen and stood. "I should go? Those cattle thieves have enough of a head start already." "Wait," Ayana said. She moved to one of her storage baskets and withdrew something wrapped in soft cloth. "You will need food for your journey." She handed him a bundle that contained strips of dried meat seasoned with desert herbs, along with small corn cakes that were still warm from her cooking fire. The food smelled delicious, and Jake realized he hadn't eaten anything substantial in over a day. "Thank you," he said, touched by her generosity to a stranger. "I don't deserve such kindness." "Kindness should not be earned," Ayana replied. "It should be freely given to those who show respect." Jake carefully tucked the food into his saddlebags. Jake reached Silver Creek just as the morning mist was lifting from the abandoned mining camp. The place had been deserted for over a year after the silver vein played out, leaving behind a collection of ramshackle buildings and rusted equipment. It was exactly the kind of place where cattle thieves would hole up. Thinking they were safe from pursuit, Thunder's hooves made soft sounds in the dust as Jake circled the camp from a distance, studying the layout. Smoke rose from the chimney of what had once been the camp saloon, and he could see the stolen cattle penned in a makeshift corral behind the largest building. The familiar Triple Star brand was clearly visible on the animals, even from his vantage point on the ridge. Jake counted the cattle carefully. All 30 head were there, just as Ayana had said. But as he watched through his spyglass, his jaw tightened with anger. Several of the animals showed signs of rough treatment, their hides marked with rope burns and cuts. The thieves had driven them too hard and cared nothing for their welfare. Movement caught his eye near the saloon. 3 men emerged, and Jake immediately recognized them from Ayana's description. 2 Mexicans and 1 Anglo with a distinctive scar across his left cheek. They were arguing about something, their voices carrying on the still morning air. Jake positioned himself closer, using the cover of abandoned mining equipment to get within earshot. What he heard made his blood boil. "We should have killed those Apache horses quick instead of playing with them," one of the Mexicans was saying. "Made too much noise." The scarred man laughed cruelly. "Wasn't my fault those animals screamed so much. Besides, we needed some entertainment after all that hard riding." The other Mexican spat in the dust. "Entertainment that might have brought a war party down on us. Those Apache don't forget when someone kills their horses for sport." "Let them come," the scarred man replied. "I've killed plenty of Apache before. They bleed just like anyone else." Jake had heard enough. These men weren't just cattle thieves. They were cold-blooded killers who took pleasure in causing pain. The way they talked about murdering Apache horses as entertainment told him everything he needed to know about their character. Moving carefully, Jake worked his way around to the back of the camp. The corral where the cattle were penned was poorly constructed, held together with rope and scrap wood. It wouldn't take much to break it open and scatter the animals, but that would create chaos that might give the thieves a chance to escape. Jake needed a different approach. He studied the camp layout once more, noting the positions of the buildings and the routes the men were taking as they moved around. The saloon had only one door facing the main street of the camp, but there was a back window that looked out toward the corral. A plan began to form in Jake's mind. It was dangerous, but it might be his only chance to take all 3 men without risking the cattle or allowing any of them to escape. He would have to time everything perfectly. Jake led Thunder to a position behind a large pile of mine tailings, where the horse would be safe, but ready for a quick escape if needed. He checked his weapons one more time, making sure his rifle was fully loaded and his pistol was riding easy in its holster. The thieves had settled into what appeared to be their morning routine. 2 of them were preparing breakfast while the scarred man walked a lazy patrol around the camp's perimeter. Jake waited until the patrol took the man to the far side of the buildings, then made his move. Moving silently through the shadows between the abandoned structures, Jake reached the back of the saloon. The window was open to let in the cool morning air, and he could hear the 2 men inside talking about their plans to sell the cattle to a buyer in Tucson. Jake positioned himself beside the window and called out in a clear, strong voice, "This is Jake Morrison from the Triple Star Ranch. You're surrounded, and those are stolen cattle in that corral. Come out with your hands up, and nobody has to get hurt." The response was immediate and violent. Gunfire erupted from inside the saloon as the 2 men shot wildly through the window. Jake had anticipated this and was pressed flat against the wall beside the opening, safely out of the line of fire. "Give it up," Jake called again. "You can't run forever. And killing those Apache horses was a mistake that's going to bring you more trouble than you can handle." There was a moment of silence from inside the saloon. Then Jake heard frantic whispering. The men were clearly rattled by his mention of the horse killing, which told him they knew they'd made enemies of dangerous people. Jake heard boots running across the wooden floor inside the saloon, then the front door slammed open. The two Mexican thieves burst out, guns drawn, looking wildly around for their attacker. But Jake had anticipated this move as well. From his position at the back window, Jake had a clear line of sight down the length of the saloon to the front door. As the first man emerged, Jake fired a warning shot that splintered the doorframe inches from his head. "Drop your weapons now," Jake commanded. Instead of surrendering, both men opened fire in Jake's direction, forcing him to duck below the window. Bullets shattered the glass above his head and buried themselves in the wooden wall behind him. Jake waited for a lull in the shooting, then popped up and returned fire. His first shot caught one of the thieves in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his gun flying. The second shot missed but came close enough to make the other man dive for cover behind a water trough, but Jake's concentration on the two men in front of him had made him forget about the third thief. The scarred man had heard the gunfire and was approaching from behind. Moving quietly through the abandoned buildings, Jake sensed the danger just as he heard the soft scrape of a boot on gravel. He spun around to find the scarred man less than 20 feet away, his gun already drawn and aimed. "Well, well, Val," the man said with an evil grin. "Looks like we got ourselves a real hero here. Too bad heroes die just as easy as anyone else." Jake's hand was near his pistol, but he knew he couldn't draw fast enough to beat a gun that was already aimed at him. The scarred man's finger was tightening on the trigger when a new voice cut through the morning air. "Drop your weapon, or you die where you stand." The voice was clear, strong, and unmistakably female. Jake's heart skipped a beat as he recognized Ayana's voice. The scarred man's eyes widened in surprise, and he began to turn toward the sound. "I said drop it," Ayana repeated. And now Jake could see her positioned on top of one of the abandoned mine buildings. A rifle aimed steadily at the thief's back. The scarred man hesitated, clearly torn between shooting Jake and dealing with this new threat. That moment of indecision was all Jake needed. His hand flashed to his pistol, drawing and firing in one smooth motion. The bullet caught the scarred man's center mass, dropping him instantly. Jake immediately spun back toward the saloon, where the remaining unwounded thief was trying to flank his position, but Ayana had already shifted her aim. Her rifle cracked once, and the second thief stumbled backward, clutching his leg. The wounded man tried to crawl toward a discarded weapon, but Jake was already moving, covering the distance in quick strides. "Stay down," Jake ordered, kicking the gun away from the crawling man's reach. "It's over." The thief who had been shot in the shoulder was leaning against the water trough, bleeding but not seriously wounded. All three thieves were now accounted for, 2 wounded but alive, 1 dead. The fight was over. Jake looked up to see Ayana, climbing down from her elevated position with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in high places. She moved to where Jake stood, her rifle still held at the ready. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her dark eyes scanning him for injuries. "No, thanks to you," Jake replied. "But what are you doing here? How did you even find me?" "I followed your trail," she said simply. "After you left yesterday, I began to think about those men and what they had done to my people's horses. Such crimes should not go unpunished." Jake realized that Ayana had traveled through the night to reach Silver Creek, tracking him across difficult terrain in darkness. The skill and determination that required was extraordinary. "You saved my life," Jake said quietly. "That man had me dead to rights." "As you would have saved mine had our positions been reversed," Ayana replied. "It is what decent people do for one another." Jake quickly secured the 2 wounded thieves, using rope from their own supplies to bind their hands. Neither man was seriously injured, though they would need medical attention eventually. The dead man would have to be buried, but that could wait until after Jake figured out what to do with his prisoners. "There's a sheriff's deputy in Tombstone," Jake said as he worked. "I can take these two there to face justice for the cattle theft." "And what of the horse killing?" Ayanna asked. "Will your white man's law punish them for that crime as well?" Jake paused in his rope work. Legally, the killing of Apache horses might not carry much weight in a territorial court, especially if the judge and jury were unsympathetic to Native Americans. But morally, it was just as serious a crime as the cattle theft. "I'll make sure they're charged with destroying property," Jake said. "It might not be enough, but it's something." Ayanna nodded, understanding the limitations Jake faced in getting full justice through official channels. "My people have their own ways of dealing with such crimes," she said quietly. Jake left Ayanna's valley before dawn, his two prisoners secured on horseback and ready for the long ride to Tombstone. The wounded men had been tended to with Apache healing herbs that Ayanna had provided, ensuring they would survive the journey to face justice. As he rode away from the peaceful valley, Jake promised himself he would return as quickly as possible. The trail to Tombstone was treacherous, winding through rocky canyons and across open desert where the sun would soon turn merciless. Jake set a steady pace, knowing that pushing too hard would endanger both the horses and his injured prisoners, but also aware that every hour of delay increased the risk of running into the thieves' associates. By mid-morning, Jake's caution proved well-founded. As they approached a narrow pass between two red stone cliffs, he spotted dust clouds in the distance behind them. Someone was following their trail, and from the speed of approach, it wasn't a casual traveler. Jake quickly surveyed the terrain ahead. The pass offered both opportunity and danger. If he could get through it first, he could defend the narrow opening against pursuit. But if the followers caught them in the open desert, he would be outnumbered and outgunned while trying to protect wounded prisoners. "Move faster," Jake ordered his captives, spurring Thunder into a quicker pace. "Your friends are coming, but they're not going to save you. They're more likely to put bullets in you to keep you from talking." The scarred thief's partner, a man named Carlos, looked nervously over his shoulder at the approaching dust cloud. "Senator Morrison, those are not our friends. We work alone, always." "Then who's following us?" Jake demanded, but he already suspected the answer. Word had spread through the territory's criminal network that the Silver Creek job had gone bad. Other outlaws were coming to investigate, and they wouldn't be friendly to anyone involved in capturing their associates. Jake pushed harder toward the pass, but the followers were gaining ground. Thunder was strong and fresh, but the prisoners' mounts were tired and carrying injured men. As they entered the narrow canyon, Jake could see their pursuers clearly for the first time, 5 riders, all heavily armed and riding hard. Jake recognized one of them as a notorious gunfighter named Red McCready, a man with a reputation for violence and a price on his head in 3 territories. If McCready was involved, this situation had just become much more dangerous. Jake found a defensible position among the rocks at the narrowest part of the pass and quickly dismounted. He tied the prisoners' horses to a stunted pine tree and checked his weapons. His rifle was fully loaded and he had plenty of ammunition. But 5 against 1 were not good odds, especially when he had to protect wounded prisoners who couldn't defend themselves. "Stay down and keep quiet," Jake ordered his captives. "If shooting starts, bullets won't care which side you're on." The sound of approaching horses echoed off the canyon walls. Jake positioned himself behind a large boulder that offered good cover and a clear field of fire down the pass. He would make the outlaws come to him, using the terrain to his advantage. Red McCready's voice boomed through the canyon. "Morrison, we know you're in there. Send out the boys and ride away, and nobody has to die today." "Can't do that, McCready," Jake called back. "These men are wanted for cattle theft and murder. They're going to face a judge and jury." Harsh laughter echoed off the rocks. "Murder? Hell, Morrison, they just killed a couple of Indian ponies. That ain't murder in any civilized court." Jake's jaw tightened with anger. "It is to me, and it is to the people whose horses they killed for sport." "You always was too soft on the Apache," McCready replied. "That's going to get you killed someday." "Maybe today?" Jake could hear the outlaws spreading out, trying to find alternative routes through the rocks. They were experienced fighters who wouldn't make the mistake of charging straight up the middle of the pass. But Jake had chosen his position well, and there were only a few ways to approach his location. A rifle cracked from somewhere to his left, and a bullet spanged off the rock near his head. Jake immediately returned fire, his shot echoing through the canyon like thunder. He heard a curse and the sound of someone scrambling for better cover. For the next several minutes, a deadly game of cat and mouse played out among the rocks. The outlaws would expose themselves just enough to take a shot, then duck back into cover. Jake responded each time, his accurate shooting keeping them pinned down but unable to advance. But Jake knew he was fighting a losing battle. He had limited ammunition, and the outlaws could afford to wait him out. Eventually, they would find a way to flank his position or simply wear him down with continuous fire. That's when he heard it. The distinctive whistle of an Apache war cry, coming from high up on the canyon walls above the outlaws. Jake's heart leaped with hope as he realized what it meant. Ayanna had not only followed them but had brought help. The outlaws heard the sound too, and Jake could sense their sudden nervousness. Fighting one cowboy was one thing, but facing Apache warriors in their own territory was something entirely different. "McCready," Jake called out, "you've got bigger problems now than just me. I'd suggest you ride away while you still can." "Don't try to bluff me, Morrison," McCready replied. But there was less confidence in his voice now. Another war cry echoed through the canyon, this one from a different direction. Then another. Jake couldn't tell how many Apache were positioned on the canyon walls, but it sounded like at least half a dozen. The outlaws were now caught in a crossfire between Jake below and warriors above. A voice called down from the rocks, speaking in the Apache language. Jake didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakably a demand for surrender. Ayanna's voice answered from another position, also in Apache, and Jake caught the word for horses in her response. Suddenly, arrows began raining down into the canyon. These weren't aimed to kill, but to terrify and confuse. The Apache were making their presence known without committing to a full attack. Giving the outlaws a chance to withdraw honorably, Red McCready's nerve finally broke. "Boys, we're getting out of here," he shouted. "This job ain't worth fighting the whole Apache nation." Jake heard the sound of horses moving quickly away from the pass, accompanied by the occasional arrow that served as encouragement for the outlaws to keep riding. Within minutes, the canyon was quiet again except for the echo of retreating hoofbeats. Ayanna appeared among the rocks as silently as a shadow, her rifle in her hands and a satisfied expression on her face. She was followed by 3 Apache warriors, all of them armed and alert but no longer aggressive now that the threat had passed. "Are you hurt?" Ayanna asked, quickly checking Jake for injuries. "I'm fine, thanks to you and your friends," Jake replied. "But how did you know to follow me?" "I told you yesterday that word spreads quickly among my people," Ayanna said with a slight smile. "When I described the men you captured and their crimes, warriors from 3 different bands volunteered to help ensure they faced justice." One of the warriors, an older man with gray-streaked hair, approached Jake with respect but caution. He spoke to Ayanna in Apache, and she translated. "Chief Blue Horse says the men who killed our horses deserve to die for their crimes, but he respects your desire to see them tried in your courts. He offers safe passage to Tombstone and protection on your return journey." Jake was deeply moved by this gesture. The Apache had every right to demand their own justice for the murder of their animals, but they were respecting his commitment to legal process. "Please tell Chief Blue Horse that I'm honored by his offer and grateful for his help today," Jake said. "These men will face justice, I promise you that." The chief nodded when Ayanna translated, then spoke again at greater length. Ayanna listened carefully before turning back to Jake. "He says that you have shown respect for our ways and concern for our losses. He declares you a friend to the Apache people, free to travel safely in our lands. This is a great honor, one given to very few white men." Jake removed his hat and bowed his head to the chief, understanding the significance of what he'd been offered. Safe passage through Apache territory was worth more than gold to anyone trying to make a living in this harsh land. The rest of the journey, too. Tombstone proceeded without incident, escorted by the Apache warriors who rode at a respectful distance, but remained clearly visible to anyone who might consider causing trouble. By late afternoon, Jake was delivering his prisoners to the town sheriff, along with a detailed account of their crimes. Sheriff Jim Williams listened carefully to Jake's report, taking notes on everything from the cattle theft to the murder of the Apache horses. "These are serious charges," he said. "The cattle theft alone will get them 5 to 10 years in territorial prison. The horse killing might be harder to prosecute, but I'll do what I can." "There were witnesses to the horse killing," Jake said. "Apache witnesses who would testify if treated with respect." Sheriff Williams nodded thoughtfully. "I'll talk to the territorial prosecutor." "Times are changing, Morrison. Maybe it's time we started treating all victims of crime with equal consideration." Jake spent the night in Tombstone's small hotel, buying supplies and preparing for the return journey. He also visited the town's doctor to ensure his former prisoners were receiving proper medical care. Both men were expected to make full recoveries in time for their trials. Early the next morning, Jake B.